My name's Mark, and until recently, I thought my marriage was rock solid. Emily and I have been together for 12 years, and though we don't have kids, we have a pretty good life. Or so I thought. We met in college, dated for a few years, and then got married right after graduation. She's always been the lively one, full of energy and charm, and I'm the steady guy, the rock she could always count on. At least that's what I believed. Lately, though, things have felt off. Emily's behavior started changing a few months back. At first, it was little things. Coming home later than usual from her yoga class, spending more time on her phone, and being unusually secretive about it. When I asked her about it, she'd just brush it off, saying it was work stuff or gossip with her friends. I didn't think much of it at first. We've always had a trusting relationship. But then she started getting massages from this new guy at the spa she frequents. His name is Kevin, and apparently he's some sort of miracle worker. Emily couldn't stop talking about how great he was. "You should try him, Mark," she'd say with a gleam in her eye. "He's amazing." I smiled and nodded. Not really interested in getting a massage, but happy that she was finding ways to relax. But then, I noticed how much she talked about him. Kevin this, Kevin that. It was starting to get under my skin, and I couldn't quite put my finger on why. Maybe it was the way her eyes lit up when she mentioned his name, or how she seemed more interested in her phone right after her appointments. One evening, as we were having dinner, she got a text. She glanced at her phone and quickly put it face down on the table. I asked who it was, and she just smiled and said, "Oh, just a friend from yoga." I didn't push it, but it gnawed at me. Emily never used to hide her phone like that. Things escalated when she started going to the spa more frequently. What used to be a once-a-month treat turned into a weekly ritual. I joked about it, saying she must be trying to bankrupt us with all those massages, but she just laughed it off, saying she needed the stress relief. I didn't argue. Work had been stressful for her, and if this Kevin guy was helping her unwind, who was I to complain? But then, last week, she came home late again, and when I asked her where she'd been, she got defensive. "Why are you always asking me that?" she snapped. "Can't a girl have some time to herself without getting the third degree?" I was taken aback by her tone. "I'm just worried, Em. You've been acting different lately." She sighed, rolling her eyes. "I'm fine, Mark. Really, just stressed. Work's been a nightmare." I let it go, but the seed of doubt had been planted. I started noticing more and more little things. The way she'd jump when her phone buzzed, the secretive smiles, the late nights out. My mind started racing, imagining all sorts of scenarios. Was she having an affair? Was it with Kevin? I didn't want to believe it. Emily was my world, and the thought of her betraying me was too painful to consider. But I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. Something was definitely off, and I needed to find out what it was. The seed of doubt had grown into a full-blown tree of suspicion. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. So one evening, when Emily said she was going to the spa again, I decided to follow her. It felt wrong, like a betrayal of the trust we had built over the years, but the gnawing suspicion was too much to bear. I needed to know the truth. I waited a few minutes after she left, then grabbed my keys and followed. I parked a little way down the street from the spa, where I could see the entrance without being seen. Emily went in, and I waited. My heart was pounding in my chest, each beat echoing the fear and anger building inside me. After about 30 minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. I walked up to the spa, hoping against hope that my suspicions were unfounded. The place was dimly lit and quiet. I slipped in through the front door, nodding at the receptionist who seemed too engrossed in her magazine to pay me much attention. The spa was a maze of corridors, but I had a good idea where Emily would be. I followed the sound of muffled voices and soft music, my steps silent on the carpeted floor. As I got closer, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Moans and gasps coming from one of the rooms. I recognized Emily's voice instantly. I stood outside the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. I pushed it open slowly, and the sight that greeted me was like a punch to the gut. There was Emily, naked and on all fours on the massage table, and behind her was Kevin, thrusting into her with a look of intense concentration. The room was dimly lit by candles, the air thick with the scent of lavender and betrayal. They were so caught up in their illicit act that they didn't even notice me at first. I stood there, frozen in shock, watching as the woman I loved was being taken by another man. When Kevin finally noticed me, his eyes widened in horror. He tried to pull out, but in his panic, he came inside her. Emily gasped, her eyes flying open in shock, and then widening even further when she saw me standing there. "Mark!" she screamed, scrambling off the table, grabbing a towel to cover herself. "What the hell are you doing here?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. The rage and betrayal I felt were too overwhelming. I lunged at Kevin, who was still fumbling with his pants, trying to cover himself. My fist connected with his jaw, and I felt the satisfying crunch of teeth breaking. He staggered back, blood pouring from his mouth, his eyes wide with fear. "Man, I'm sorry," he mumbled through the blood and broken teeth. "I didn't know! You didn't know?" I roared, my voice echoing off the walls. "You didn't know she was married? You didn't know you were f***ing my wife?" I hit him again, and again, until he was on the floor, whimpering and bleeding. Emily was screaming, trying to pull me off him, but I was beyond reason. All I could see was red. All I could feel was the searing pain of betrayal. Finally, I stopped, breathing heavily, my knuckles bruised and bloody. Kevin was a mess on the floor, his face a pulp of blood and broken teeth. Emily was crying, clutching the towel around her like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. "How could you, Emily?" I asked, my voice raw with emotion. "How could you do this to us? To me?" She didn't answer, just stood there, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking. The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of everything that had just happened. I took a step back, looking at the woman I had loved for so long, and felt nothing but a deep, aching emptiness. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the room, out of the spa, and out of the life I thought I knew. The drive home was a blur, my mind numb, my heart shattered. I had found the truth, and it was more painful than I had ever imagined. The drive home felt like an eternity, my thoughts swirling in a maelstrom of anger, disbelief, and heartbreak. I parked the car in our driveway, sat there for a moment, and tried to collect myself. But the rage was too consuming, the pain too raw. I couldn't sit still. I stormed into the house, slamming the door behind me. I didn't know what to do next, whether to wait for Emily or to pack my things and leave. But then, I heard the door open behind me. Emily had followed me home, her face still wet with tears, her eyes wide with fear and regret. She stood there in the doorway looking like a ghost of the woman I once knew. "Mark," she said, her voice trembling. "Please let me explain." "Explain!" I shouted, turning to face her. "Explain how you were f***ing another man? Explain how you betrayed me?" She flinched at my words, her hands clutching the towel tighter around her. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she whispered. "It just happened. I was lonely, and he was there. And I didn't mean for it to go this far." "Didn't mean for it to go this far?" I echoed, my voice dripping with disbelief. "How long, Emily? How long have you been f***ing him?" She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "A few months," she admitted. "It started as just massages, but then, I don't know, we connected." "Connected?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean you f***ed him? And now you're trying to justify it by calling it a connection?" Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head. "I didn't want to hurt you, Mark, I swear. I love you. I was just so lonely." "Lonely?" I roared. "You think I wasn't lonely? You think I didn't miss you every second we were apart? But I never betrayed you, Emily. Never. I loved you and I trusted you. And this is how you repay me?" She sobbed, falling to her knees. "I'm so sorry," she cried. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. Please, please forgive me. We can work through this. I can change." I stared at her, feeling a mixture of pity and contempt. "Change?" I asked. "You think you can just say sorry and everything will be okay? That we'll go back to the way things were?" "I'll do anything," she begged. "I'll go to therapy. I'll quit my job. I'll never see him again. Just please don't leave me." The desperation in her voice was palpable, and for a moment, I almost believed her. Almost. But then I remembered the look of ecstasy on her face as she f***ed Kevin, and the pain came rushing back. "I can't do this, Emily," I said, my voice breaking. "I can't look at you without seeing him. I can't touch you without feeling his hands on you. You broke us. You broke me." She reached out for me, her hands trembling. "Please, Mark. Please, I love you. We can get through this." I shook my head, stepping back. I need time, I said. I need space. I can't be here right now. She looked at me, her eyes filled with despair. Where will you go? I don't know, I admitted. But I can't stay here, not with you. With that, I turned and walked out the door, leaving her sobbing on the floor. I got back into my car and drove, not knowing where I was going, only knowing that I needed to get away. Away from the betrayal, away from the pain, away from the woman who had shattered my heart. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours, my mind replaying the scene over and over again. Emily and Kevin, the look on her face when she saw me, the blood on my knuckles. It was all too much. Eventually, I found myself at a quiet park. I pulled into the parking lot, turned off the engine, and just sat there, staring blankly ahead. The numbness started to set in, but it didn't dull the pain. It was just a different kind of agony. I thought back to all the moments we'd shared, all the years we'd spent together. I remembered our first date, the way she'd laughed at my jokes, the way her eyes sparkled when she looked at me. I remembered our wedding day, how beautiful she looked walking down the aisle, how happy we'd been, how it had all gone so wrong. Tears started to blur my vision, and I didn't bother wiping them away. I let myself cry, let the grief and anger and betrayal wash over me. I felt like my entire life had been turned upside down. Everything I thought I knew about love and trust shattered in an instant. Eventually the tears subsided, leaving me feeling hollow and exhausted. I took a deep breath and tried to think rationally about what to do next. I couldn't stay at home with Emily, that much was clear, but I had nowhere else to go. I didn't want to burden my friends with my problems, and I wasn't ready to talk to anyone about what had happened. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts, hesitating for a moment before calling my older brother, Jack. He answered on the third ring, his voice cheerful. Hey, Mark. What's up? Hey, Jack, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need a place to stay for a few days. Can I crash at your place? There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. Of course, man. What's going on? Are you okay? Not really, I admitted, but I'll explain when I get there. All right, he said, concern evident in his voice. I'll be here. Just take your time. Thanks, Jack. I appreciate it. I hung up and started the car, heading towards Jack's place. The drive was a blur, my mind still racing with everything that had happened. When I finally arrived, Jack was waiting for me on the porch. He took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. Jesus, Mark, you look like hell, he said, his voice full of concern. I managed a weak smile. Thanks. I feel like hell. He led me inside, and we sat down in the living room. Jack handed me a beer and waited patiently while I gathered my thoughts. Emily's been cheating on me, I said finally, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Jack's eyes widened in shock. What? Are you serious? I nodded, taking a swig of the beer. I caught her with the masseur from her spa. It was bad, Jack. Really bad. God, Mark, I'm so sorry, I had no idea. Neither did I said, my voice breaking. I thought we were happy. I thought she loved me. Jack put a hand on my shoulder, his expression sympathetic. What are you going to do? I don't know, I admitted. I just needed to get away. I can't be around her right now. Stay here as long as you need, Jack said firmly. We'll figure this out together. I nodded, grateful for his support. We spent the rest of the evening talking, Jack listening patiently as I poured out my heart. He didn't try to offer solutions or tell me everything would be okay. He just listened, and that was exactly what I needed. As the night wore on, exhaustion finally caught up with me. Jack set me up in the guest room, and I collapsed onto the bed, my mind and body utterly spent. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by dreams of Emily and Kevin, of betrayal and anger. The next few days were a blur of numbness and pain. Jack tried to keep me occupied, taking me out for walks, cooking meals, and just being there for me. But no matter what we did, the ache in my chest never went away. Emily called and texted constantly, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I wasn't ready to face her, to hear her excuses or apologies. I needed time to process everything, to figure out what my next steps would be. One evening, as I sat on the porch with Jack, watching the sunset, he turned to me with a serious expression. Mark, I know this is the last thing you want to think about right now, but you need to start planning your next move. Are you going to stay with Emily and try to work things out? Or are you going to leave her? I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I don't know, Jack. Part of me wants to believe that we can fix this, that she really does love me and made a mistake. But another part of me can't get past what she did. I don't know if I can ever trust her again. It's a tough decision, Jack said quietly. But whatever you decide, I'll support you. Just remember that you deserve to be happy, and you deserve someone who respects and loves you. His words struck a chord with me, and I realized that he was right. I deserve better than this. I deserve to be with someone who valued me, who wouldn't betray my trust. The realization was both freeing and terrifying. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't go back to the way things were. I needed to take control of my life, to make decisions that would lead me towards healing and happiness, even if that meant letting go of the woman I once loved. A week had passed since I had discovered Emily's betrayal. The initial shock and pain had started to give way to a cold, simmering anger. I couldn't stop replaying the scene in my mind, the sight of her with Kevin, the lies, and the deceit. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I needed to do something, not just for myself, but to make sure she understood the gravity of what she'd done. Emily had to feel the pain she had inflicted on me. It was time for revenge. Jack, ever the pragmatic older brother, tried to talk me out of it. Mark, I get it. You're hurt and you want to hurt her back, but revenge? It could make things worse. I don't care, I snapped. She deserves it. She needs to understand what she's done. After some thought, I decided on a plan. I wanted to hit her where it would hurt the most. Emily had always been concerned about appearances, about maintaining the perfect image of a happy, successful couple. Exposing her infidelity in a public and humiliating way seemed fitting. The first step was to gather more evidence. I already had the mental image of her and Kevin, but I needed something concrete, something undeniable. I bought a small, discreet camera and planted it in the bedroom of our home, hoping to catch them in the act again. It was a risk. If Emily found it, she'd know I was onto her, but I was willing to take that chance. A few days later, I got what I needed. Emily hadn't learned from her mistake. She was back at it again, this time with Kevin in our own bed. The camera captured everything. Watching the footage made my blood boil, but it also steeled my resolve. I downloaded the video onto a USB drive and sent it to my lawyer, ensuring I had legal documentation of her infidelity. Next, I hacked into Emily's social media accounts. She was quite the social butterfly, always posting pictures of us, of her at various events, always presenting the facade of a perfect life. I drafted a post from her account, attaching a still from the video, a particularly incriminating shot that left no doubt about what was happening. The caption read, "I betrayed the man who loved me. This is what I did to him." I scheduled it to go live during one of her high-profile charity events, where all her friends and colleagues would be in attendance. The day of the event, I dressed in my sharpest suit and went to a bar near the venue. I wanted to be close enough to witness the fallout without being directly involved. As the time for the post approached, I ordered a drink and waited, my heart pounding with anticipation. At exactly 7 p.m., my phone buzzed with notifications as the post went live. I took a deep breath and sipped my drink, imagining the scene unfolding at the event. Emily's phone would be buzzing like crazy. Her friends and colleagues would be seeing the post, the image, the truth laid bare for everyone to see. Within minutes, my phone started blowing up with texts and calls from mutual friends, all of them shocked and horrified by what they were seeing. I ignored them, focusing instead on the mental image of Emily's face as she realized what had happened. The thought of her horror and humiliation brought a twisted sense of satisfaction. Then came the text from Emily. It was a flurry of messages, starting with confusion, then anger, and finally desperation. She begged me to take the post down, saying she was sorry, that she could explain, that we could work through this. I didn't respond. Instead, I sent a text to her parents, who had always idolized their daughter and thought she could do no wrong. I included a link to the post, making sure they saw exactly what their precious daughter had done. The satisfaction I felt as I imagined their disappointment and anger was almost euphoric. Emily had hurt me deeply, but now she was feeling a fraction of that pain. She was facing the consequences of her actions, and it felt damn good to be the one to deliver them. When I finally returned to Jack's place, I found him waiting for me, his expression a mix of concern and disapproval. "You did it, didn't you?" I nodded, a grim smile on my face. "Yeah, I did. And how do you feel?" I thought about it for a moment. Better. Not good, but better. She needed to be brought down a notch to see what it's like to be humiliated and betrayed. Jack sighed, shaking his head. "I just hope this doesn't come back to bite you, Mark." "It won't," I said firmly. I made sure of that. The next few days were chaotic. Emily's post had gone viral, and everyone was talking about it. She had to deal with the fallout at work, at her social events, even with her family. I didn't hear from her again, and that was fine by me. I had made my point. But as the initial rush of satisfaction started to fade, I was left with the realization that revenge, while sweet in the moment, didn't change the past. The betrayal was still there, the pain still real. And now, I had to figure out how to move forward, how to rebuild my life from the ashes of our broken marriage. I was ready for the challenge. Emily had shown me her true colors, and now it was time for me to focus on myself, to find happiness on my own terms. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I wouldn't be looking back. With the satisfaction of my revenge fading, reality started to set in. I knew what had to come next. Divorce. It was time to sever the ties that bound me to Emily and move forward with my life. I contacted Marcia, my lawyer, to discuss the next steps. "Mark, I've seen the video and the social media post," Marcia said, her tone professional yet sympathetic. "We have more than enough evidence for a solid case. This will work in your favor during the divorce proceedings." "Thanks, Marcia," I replied, my voice heavy with resignation. "I just want this over with as quickly and painlessly as possible." "I understand," she said. "I'll file the paperwork today. Emily will be served with the divorce papers soon. Given the circumstances, I don't expect her to contest it much." True to her word, Marcia moved swiftly. Within a few days, Emily was served with the divorce papers. She called me, sobbing, begging for a chance to explain, to fix things. But my mind was made up. There was no going back. "Emily, it's over," I said firmly. "You destroyed our marriage. There's nothing left to save." "Please, Mark," she cried. "I'll do anything. Just give me a chance." I felt a pang of sorrow, but it was quickly overshadowed by the memory of her betrayal. "No, Emily, it's too late. We're done." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of meetings with Marcia, signing documents and splitting assets. I tried to remain as detached as possible, focusing on the practical aspects rather than the emotional fallout. Marcia guided me through the process with a steady hand, ensuring that I got what I deserved. Throughout it all, I stayed at Jack's place. He was my rock, offering support and distraction when I needed it most. We spent our evenings watching movies, going for runs, and talking about anything but the divorce. It was a welcome respite from the chaos of my unraveling life. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of legal meetings, Jack and I sat on the porch, nursing beers and watching the sunset. "You know, Mark," he said thoughtfully, "this is probably one of the hardest things you'll ever go through, but you're handling it better than most would." I shrugged, feeling a mix of exhaustion and determination. "I don't feel like I'm handling it well. I'm just trying to get through it." "And you are," Jack insisted. "You're stronger than you think." His words brought a small measure of comfort. I was getting through it, one day at a time, and with each passing day, the pain became a little more bearable, the future a little less daunting. Finally, the day of the divorce hearing arrived. Emily and I sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, avoiding each other's gaze. Marcia presented our case succinctly, laying out the evidence of infidelity and the reasons for the divorce. Emily's lawyer tried to mitigate the damage, but there was little they could do. The judge listened carefully, then ruled in my favor. The divorce was granted, and I was awarded a fair share of our assets. It was over. I was free. As we left the courtroom, Emily approached me, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "Mark," she said softly, "I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you." I looked at her, the woman I had once loved more than anything, and felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. I know, Emily, but what's done is done. We both need to move on. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I hope you find happiness, Mark. Truly. Same to you, I said, turning away and walking out of the courthouse. The sun was shining brightly, a stark contrast to the storm that had raged in my life for the past few months. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past lifting from my shoulders. It was a new beginning, a chance to rebuild and find happiness on my own terms. As I walked to my car, I thought about the future. It wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it. The pain of betrayal had changed me, but it hadn't broken me. I was stronger, more resilient, and ready to take on whatever came next. That evening, Jack and I celebrated with a quiet dinner at his place. We toasted to new beginnings, to the end of one chapter and the start of another. Here's to moving on, Jack said, clinking his glass against mine. To moving on, I echoed, feeling a genuine smile spread across my face for the first time in what felt like forever. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was ready to walk it. One step at a time, I would rebuild my life, find my happiness, and leave the pain of the past behind. And with each step, I would remember that I deserved better, and that the best was yet to come. In the months that followed the finalization of the divorce, life began to take on a new rhythm. It wasn't always easy, and there were days when the weight of everything that had happened felt almost unbearable. But with each passing day, I found myself growing stronger, more determined to move forward and create a life that brought me peace and happiness. I decided to make some changes. The first step was selling the house that Emily and I had shared. It was filled with too many memories, too much pain. I needed a fresh start, somewhere I could build new memories untainted by betrayal. I found a small but cozy apartment closer to Jack's place and moved in with a sense of relief. The new apartment was my sanctuary. I took my time decorating it, choosing furniture and decor that reflected my tastes and personality. It was a process of rediscovery, a way to reclaim my identity apart from the life I had built with Emily. I filled the space with things that made me happy. Books, artwork, a comfortable chair by the window where I could sit and read or simply watch the world go by. Jack continued to be a constant source of support. We spent a lot of time together, and his presence was a comfort during the hardest moments. He encouraged me to pursue hobbies and activities that I had neglected over the years. I picked up photography again, a passion from my younger days, and found solace in capturing the beauty of the world around me. One day while I was out taking photos at a local park, I met someone who would play a pivotal role in my healing journey. Her name was Sarah, and she was an artist who often visited the park to sketch and paint. We struck up a conversation about our respective passions, and there was an immediate connection. Sarah was warm, kind, and had a way of making me feel at ease. We started meeting regularly, sharing our work and exploring the city together. Sarah's positivity and zest for life were infectious, and being around her helped me see the world in a new light. She knew about my past, and while she never pried, she was always there to listen when I needed to talk. As our friendship grew, so did my feelings for her. I found myself looking forward to our time together, cherishing the moments of laughter and genuine connection. Sarah was everything Emily wasn't: honest, supportive, and completely herself. She showed me that love didn't have to be complicated or painful, that it could be a source of joy and strength. One evening, as we sat on a bench overlooking the lake, I decided to open up to her about my feelings. "Sarah," I began, nervous but determined, "I need to tell you something. You've been such an important part of my life these past few months. You've helped me heal in ways I didn't think were possible. And I've started to have feelings for you." She turned to look at me, her eyes soft and understanding. "Mark, I feel the same way. I care about you deeply, and I want to see where this can go." We shared a kiss under the twilight sky, and it felt like the beginning of something beautiful. Being with Sarah was a new chapter, one that I was excited to write. She had shown me that it was possible to love again, to trust again, and to build a future free from the shadows of the past. In the year that followed, Sarah and I grew even closer. We traveled together, explored new hobbies, and supported each other in our creative endeavors. She became my partner, my confidant, and my best friend. With her by my side, I felt like I could face anything. Reflecting on the journey I had been through, I realized how much I had grown. The betrayal and the pain had been transformative, forcing me to confront my deepest fears and insecurities. But through it all, I had emerged stronger, more self-assured, and more attuned to what truly mattered in life. I had learned that healing wasn't about forgetting the past, but about embracing it as part of my story. It was about finding the courage to move forward, to open my heart to new possibilities, and to believe that happiness was within reach. Sarah was a testament to that belief, a reminder that love could be a source of healing and joy. One evening, as Sarah and I sat on the balcony of our apartment watching the sunset, I felt a deep sense of contentment. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had led me to a place of peace and fulfillment. I turned to her and took her hand in mine. "Thank you, Sarah," I said, my voice filled with gratitude. "For everything. For being here. For loving me. For helping me see that there is always hope." She smiled, her eyes shining with love. "I'm grateful for you too, Mark. For your strength, your kindness, and your heart. Here's to the future, whatever it may hold." As we sat there, hand in hand, I knew that the future was bright. The past had shaped me, but it didn't define me. With Sarah by my side, I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I was capable of finding happiness and love, no matter what challenges lay ahead.